a plea from volunteers and a lifeline in the international conflict for democracy. We'll have Olha Bosak, Ukrainian Freedom Fund, Ivonna Kostyna, volunteer 100 Ukraine Vault, and Lada Roslycky, international security expert. Please.
The international community to make it very well aware of the fact that an international conflict is taking place in Ukraine. The world is changing very quickly, and unfortunately not for the better. Russian propaganda, news, social websites have zombified many to believe that democracy equals fascism, and that heavy artillery equals humanitarian aid, and that terrorists are peacemakers. In the spring, the Russian Federation violated Ukraine and took over Crimea. The world watched. The world continues to watch silently as many people continue to be abducted, terrorized, and murdered, particularly minorities such as the Tatars and Ukrainians in Crimea. The world watches. Today, we have seen a Russian invasion of Ukraine prolonging and ending up into something that some people are calling an election in the areas of the Luhansk and Donetsk People Republics. These are international terrorists backed by Moscow. The fact that European Union has allowed certain of its citizens to participate in such a farcical election, particularly men and women from the far-right nationalist organizations, so working hard against democracy inside of the European Union, is ghastly. Due to years of corruption and purposeful degradation of the Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian state, along with its new government, is not able to help support the men and women fighting so hard for democracy on their own territory. For this reason, we have had an incredible amount of volunteers from all over the world risking their lives and spending a lot of money to support the men and women in the field. Today, we are calling your attention to realize there is no ceasefire. The ceasefire that exists in Ukraine exists only on paper, and men and women continue to need your support and donations. The terrible conditions that we are witnessing will be talked to you more about a young, beautiful, brave woman who takes a lot of time and effort to go and help those fighting for democracy in the new globalizing world.
Доброго дня.
Good afternoon. I represent the fund Volunteer 100 Ukraine Vault, and our priority is to help our armed forces. In the video for media advisory in our letter, you can see a report from our trip to Brigade 93. Lada and I did it, and it's near Donetsk airport, and they retreated. They're on vacations, but we show conditions, and the conditions not only they have, but in ATO there are many things that are missing, and mostly volunteers are working to provide those things. We take everything to the front: medical equipment, food, everything. Among medicine, the catastrophe with medicine in Ukraine, because we were not planning our activity for military activities. How to treat ourselves under the conditions that don't meet, sterile conditions. We don't have like Celox. We don't have analogous medicine like they have in the West. We don't have such preparations like encephalopharyngal tubes, arrays, etc. And we have to cooperate with many international organizations around the world and to deliver from everywhere that assistance to the first aid packs, because many of those who are on the first line, they don't have those first aid steps. Sets. Very often they don't have doctors, and nobody will be provided to them. Nobody will assist them. We don't have we don't have a military medicine. We don't have understand how to treat these soldiers. We brought different professionals from Austria and from other European countries that gave lectures or trainings in our military hospitals for doctors who receive the wounded and who provide the first aid. That we should all of us, we should get the experience. Ukrainian government should get that experience. For us, in cooperation, we need to provide assistance for those who are in the battle. What has happened in Ukraine, that experience we are getting in cooperating during the cooperation between people, NGOs, and international NGOs, it's very important for us. The war will be over one day. But it's important to preserve this experience of cooperation with each other. For us to be able to provide assistance not only to those who are in the battle, but to ourselves, for us to build the country together. Volunteers provide to the front everything. The winter is coming. The temperature is minus 10 now at night. Anyone who was a tourist who understand what it means. And our soldiers don't have sleeping bags and no warm uniform. Military Ministry of Defense that has not provided that warm clothing to our soldiers. No warm underwear, no thermal underwear, nothing. So there is a big problem with winter tires. We bring them from everywhere where they ask, but we cannot cover everything. And not a few pay attention to that, but this is something that several days ago I received a call from one of my friends from Battalion 25 of Territorial Defense Kiev Rus, and he thanks that we saved his life here because of those tires. In emergency situation, which happens very often in the front, because he had new tires, that saved him because he started to slide. The car started to slide on the road, and because of those tires, he was able to survive. The war is not over. We should unite, and we should provide to our army. We have the list of what they need. A lot of funds get united around Ukraine just to help to those who need and who defend us daily from awful things. But we are happy we don't see them. Please. Don't stop helping volunteer organizations. Remember, there are those who need our assistance. Thank you.
Miss Olga Bosak. Charity fund, Ukrainian Freedom Fund, was established soon after the aggression in Crimea. It was done instinctively. At that time, we felt that we should protect and defend ourselves, and soon after that, we understood that it was a right step, and quite quickly we were joined by many Ukrainian and international organizations, and now we have a network of volunteers in more than 10 countries in the world. And during the last years, Ukrainian army was almost ruined, and we have to build it up from scratch now. Unfortunately, among the leaders and commanders and responsible bureaucrats, there are many people whom we suspect as traitors, and during the last years of presidentship, the last president, the leaders of Ukrainian army became those people who obviously supported pro-Russian interests. And today we have to think again about the military capacity of Ukraine. The warfare brings us to think about funds and strategy for allocation of the funds for defense of the country, both in short-term and long-term perspective. Volunteer organizations have been making the base for preparation of Ukraine for long-term defense strategy During the first month of the warfare, we have purchased a lot of things, starting with food, with medical things, with medical equipment, tactical weapon, drones, many sorts of things, and we spent more than 1,800,000 for this. Actually, spending is quite thoroughly controlled and audited by international companies. Now we put many hopes on the latest decree and resolution that volunteers and the Ministry of Defense should cooperate together in order to strengthen their effort aimed at defense. Of course, the volunteers could not substitute the state, but volunteers can provide public control over spending and all the activities aimed at strengthening defense capacity of the country. And we believe that having done much during latest months, we have a moral duty and we have a moral right to know in more detail what is done by the army commander and Minister of Defense. Minister of Defense has got millions and millions of hryvnia from civil society, how that money was spent. They were authorized to make a lot of purchase operations. How do they do this? They have got a lot of support from the international community. How this support and dates is used. Also, we would like to know how do they spend money for purchase of necessary weapon, machinery, military equipment, etc. We would like to see short-term, middle-term, and long-term concept for the purchase of equipment and, in general, for the defense of the country. We would like to follow up how the law on lustration in the army is implemented, both in the ministry and in the army. I believe that participating in the work of the new government, volunteers cooperating with the work of new government, volunteers will be able to inform public in more detail what's going on. Our volunteers later this week go to the ATO zone to check how the equipment and supplies which were provided there, how they are delivered and used. Our foundation is an independent organization aimed at building up democratic and civilized society in Ukraine. But in these years of warfare, we concentrate our efforts at the assistance and help to Ukrainian army. That's why we always will follow up and critically take the government's work on the strengthening defense of the country. Thank you very much, Ivonna. Whether there are any questions? Dear colleagues, do we have questions?
Lada, in your actual statement, you mentioned that the activity of the volunteers it's slightly decreased because of the ceasefire.
Yes.
Can you explain why just the volunteers believe that the activity in the ATO zone is decreased and their support is not that needed, or what is their primary motivation?
The ceasefire has actually turned media attention away to the situation. in the east. Rather surprisingly, even in Kiev, while I'm speaking with people showing a video that we took from the front of last week, out of 5 men driving a taxi, 2 didn't even know that this was going on. So this has a negative impact on the level of donations that we're receiving, and the international community really must be made aware that a full-fledged international conflict continues to take place in Ukraine.
Can you provide maybe any numbers, like how much the donation level decreased?
I think it can better hand it over to Olha or
Так, давайте послухаємо, як знизився рівень пожертвувань добровольчих під час режиму припинення вогню.
Let's hear how the volunteer donations from people have decreased. Unfortunately, the ceasefire resulted in considerable decrease in donations from people because it seems to ordinary people that ceasefire works and that the situation is getting better, but we keep visiting that area on a weekly basis, and we know the situation on the site. Unfortunately, regular citizens who watch TV and scroll on the internet, they do not understand the situation, the real situation. I do not know what was the reason of the drop in donations, but actually this is the fact. Do you think that this is somehow connected with the fact that Russia tried to pretend that they were implementing Minsk agreements? Probably it could be connected to this. This weekend we had a special festival in Art Arsenal, and this was a charity event aimed at fundraising for the soldiers, and we very soon we will present the exact figures, how many people and how much money we would earn. You are right that the level of donations dropped. That's natural. Donors believe that since there is a ceasefire and there is no raise in needs. But observing how the situation with the Minsk agreements develops, I may expect that people gradually will understand that there is no ceasefire actually, and that there are more needs now. Some donors who believed that ceasefire was serious, they now become irritated with the fact that the ceasefire is not complied with. Can you mention some figures? During the first 3 weeks of when our foundation was created in April, during the first 3 weeks in April, we got $150,000. And then the speed of donations, or the rate of donations, was at the level of $2,000 per day. But with the beginning of ceasefire, donations considerably dropped down. Do you think this sharp decrease is related to ceasefire or with the growth in number of charity foundations? I do not think that this is related to the growing number of charity foundations. Actually, without big number of charity funds, we won't be able to cope with the problem. That's why I think that this is due to the fact that people simply believe that there is a ceasefire and no needs.
The international community's, in my opinion, not doing enough. And I'm from Canada, you know me, and I'm just going to ask you: is for your volunteer work, has your volunteer group or your organizations or whoever you are? I haven't been following you well enough. Very important question for Canadians. To donate for your volunteer work, have you got a tax number, so that people can get a tax receipt? Because I think we should have this kind of thing. What do you think?
I think that that's a really important question, and because there are so many different volunteer groups, some do have it, some don't. There are organizations that cooperate together. The Ukrainian Freedom Fund is one of the most transparent funds, which is why I chose to cooperate with them, and they provide the documents that are needed. I don't think you're.
Do you have a tax number that for Canada or not? So we can donate and receive tax exemption or tax credit for this donation? You don't?
Unfortunately, no, but we hope we will, and we are working on spreading our network in Canada as well.
If I just may add something to this question, the funds here are registered, and there are organizations that that are cooperating with these funds abroad, which are able to provide the necessary tax receipts. And along the same lines, many volunteer groups have received a lot of black PR, being accused of smuggling or stealing the money, not delivering. And this is once again so important to understand, yes, to an extent this has been happening, and to be very careful with the organizations that you choose to support and cooperate with. And once again, these two are the ones that really meet that mark for my perspective.
Чи є в нас ще запитання, колеги?
Are there more questions? You mentioned about the reports from Ukrainian government, or absence of reports, better to say. Do you know the assistance from Canada, from the US, has it arrived to Ukraine? Do you have some evidence? Anybody informed you about that? I can tell you that we are waiting. We would like to see the report, detailed report of how that assistance was used, and in particular from Canada. We know about it. We know about the assistance from the government of Canada or Lithuania, and from some other countries, and we volunteers are very interested to find out how that is used. We want to see, then we will understand which niche we should take, how we can help, and how we can add to that assistance. Thank you.
I'm from the United States, and are you aware of the disparity between the American public's sentiment and our government's actions? I think the same is true in Canada and probably most of the West, that American people hugely support Ukraine. It becomes a phenomenon. It's overwhelming. And do you have any suggestions on how to bridge that gap? I've been working very hard in my city of Cleveland and so on to do that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I hope we share the same solution for the problem. Our fund, Ukrainian Freedom Fund, tries to unite all of those people who are aware of the problem in Ukraine and who are ready to support. And we also hope that our network all over the world will influence their governments. So that's how we see that problem. We have our teams all over the world, and hopefully they will not only donate, but they also will ask their government how do they support Ukraine.
Yes, okay, Yakuyu.
I would like to add a little bit to that question. Actually, for me it's a phenomenon how people from abroad support Ukrainian simple people who are in war currently, and as I said before, for me it's a great example of how we can cooperate for the future. Because as I stated, the war is not forever. We will someday see the solution of this conflict, and further on we should see how can the people from Ukraine, from Canada, from Europe, how can the from other countries all over the world, how can the young people cooperate among each other to create different projects for helping each other in informational spheres, in material spheres. It's also about the education. A lot of projects should be made after the war. And for me, it's a great example how we can cooperate for the future. And it's great that finally American people and Canadian people see the real face of Ukrainian young students, people. Thank you.
Yes. Oh, you're very remarkable. And Slava Ukraini.
On that note, I would like to invite you to view 2 minutes of a longer video that has been made a few weeks ago while we went to deliver volunteer goods. This video will be cut short, but should give you a really good idea of not only the work, but the products that are being delivered by the volunteers. If you could please play it. Yeah, that other men got from 1986, and I asked about whether they have proper bandages, and this is a medical unit with their own ambulance, and this is the bandage that the Ministry of Defense gave. Oh my God. This is an antique.
Oh, yes.
You can buy this in antique markets in France. 1957. And these are young guys. Yeah, there's a big difference. And this is all these are from volunteers, and this is what the Ukrainian government is, or Ministry of Defense is giving. The stove that we saw upstairs is from the Ministry of Defense, and this is from the volunteers. So here's another shocking example. This is what the Ministry of Defense gives, a tourniquet from 1985, obviously bulky and old technology. This is what the volunteers give, American standard lightweight tourniquets. Another difference, big one, why volunteers need to be supported by the international community. So President Poroshenko
Чи є в нас ще запитання?
Any question?
Bring up this subject. Thank you so much, our honored expert on security issues. Дякую, дуже дякую волонтерам за те, що ви робите, і за те, що вам ще
Thank you very much, dear volunteers, for what you do and for what you will do to help our soldiers. And we hope that media here, they will hear us, and people will find out. When they learn that from me, they will donate more to help our soldiers on the front line. Thank you.